Right. So I'll share a little bit about women and economics. And the talk is going to be centered on two things. One is the role of women in economics as a profession, and then also the role of women in economics as a discipline. And I decided to make it this twofold, just so that we're not bogged in the technicalities of the discipline of economics, but more to talk about what we can do and something that's relevant for us as you know, women who want to take up leadership roles. So first, I'll just do a short introduction of economics and why it's important, so that it looks like I have a purpose as an economist, and I hope you all think so. And then I'll talk about women in the economic profession. Why are there so few women in the economics profession? And then I'll delve a bit into the economics discipline itself and how it represents women, and why we need more women in the economics profession, and how that will also affect the discipline as a whole. And finally, I'll end with a bit of information on the Malawi women labor force participation and the economic opportunities that Malawian women face. And I promise you there is only one graph in this whole presentation. So economics, I was really happy to hear one of the participants, I think the other day, when they said that they never thought they'd pick up an economics book, but they finally did. So I was very excited to hear that. But as you know, economics is a study of how humans make decisions in the face of scarcity. So basically how we make our decisions on a daily basis. But in economics, we study how individuals make those decisions, how families make decisions, and how nations make those decisions, that we have a limited amount of resources at our disposal, whether as people or as a country, but there is a vast amount of things that we want to do or that we need to do, and we have to have some sort of mechanism on deciding how are we going to use what we have to get the best results. And personally, I was exposed to economics at age 14, and at that age, I decided that this is what I wanted to do with my life. My parents tried to make me to go to med school. When I went to Chanko, my parents tried to make me go to law school, and they said if I was an economist, I would be jobless. But I insisted because I was intrigued by this idea, and it seemed relevant to the things that we did every day. But when I went to college, I realized economics is very broad. And so they taught us everything. So there are so many disciplines within economics. So there's health economics and agriculture economics and trade economics and monetary economics. And there's feminist economics, which is what we'll talk about later today. So by the time I got my degree, I was actually a little bit confused on what to do, because it seemed like everything was important. But the point is that this is it's a discipline that affects literally a lot of the policies that we make as a nation and as a society, and it makes it quite relevant for us as women to be involved. But economists are mostly men. There have been only 2 Nobel Prizes that have been given to women since it started. It's out of the 51. And as of last year, we were still saying only 1, until Esther Duflo received her Nobel Prize last year. So now only 2 women have ever been awarded the Nobel laureate in the Nobel Prize in economics. And I show this because, yes, the Nobel Prize seems like something just completely off the radar, but it is something that displays, just when you trickle it down, this is basically what it's like in the economics profession, that very few women actually get to the top and actually get to decision-making places. And so there've been a lot of digging into why are there few women in economics. After what I have explained, there's a lot of different aspects of it, and it seems like it's something that would be very relevant. And so recently there's been a lot of people who've been intrigued to study the role of women in economics and why it seems like even when women do get into the profession, it's difficult to progress in the profession. And I'm sure throughout the course, you've heard a lot about this in many other disciplines. So, but in economics, we find that in Europe, there are disparities. Only 20% of economists are women. In the US, only 15% of professors are women. And we find that even when women publish as much and they perform as much, they are less likely to get the same promotions as men, which is a story we know all too well. And economics has been found to have a worse gender balance than other sciences. So you can see in this chart here, you have a girl who is just represented by a small slice of the pie, and you have the men who are just relaxing and enjoying their life, in the profession. And this, of course, speaks to a lot of other aspects and other professions. So why is this? So one of the reasons is that people say, oh, girls, they don't like math, right? So they're less likely to choose economics because there's a lot of equations and graphs. But it's also a vicious cycle, because if you don't see yourself in a certain profession, if your mind is always that this is for men, you are less likely to even think about it unless you are specifically exposed to having that opportunity. And that's why exposure and having role models is always very important. If you never see a female economist, it's very unlikely that a young girl would then choose to study economics when they're at that point in their lives. But the other thing is the constraints that women face in or other disciplines, that women face constraints like the biological clock. I remember in 2019, I've been to a lot of conferences to present my papers, and people say all sorts of things. And when you say you're from Malawi, they're like, oh, where is that? But I remember when I said, oh, I'm going to get married, there were those women who came to talk to me about, have I really thought about what that does to my career? That, you're smart and you have potential, and how that could hold me back, but they were just sharing how just by choosing to have a family, you have sort of decided that you're not going to progress, because a lot of our policies still don't accommodate our careers as women and also having a family. But the two shouldn't have to be mutually exclusive. But another key aspect is the nature of economics itself, which I'll talk about in the next slide. So economics was discovered in 1776 by this man, Adam Smith, who is called the father of economics. But his idea was that, how do you get your dinner? He said, the guy who sells you bread does not sell you bread because he cares that you're hungry. He sells you bread because he wants a profit. He wants something for himself. And so the discipline was developed out of the idea of self-interest, that there is a rational being who is making these decisions in the face of scarcity in a rational way, because he wants to be happy or he wants a profit for his business, and that this being is competitive and is not driven by emotion or interdependence. And when you hear that, if you saw some of the YouTube links that I shared, that automatically to you doesn't sound like how you would describe a woman. Most women are more emotional and more interdependent. People exist in communities and act emotionally. So you find that in the study of economics, by automatically assuming that, you are automatically assuming that women will play a lesser role, because women are not likely to behave in the way that is described. So what can be said about women in economics? What can be said about other non-individualistic communities like Malawi? So in Malawi, I'm really happy to say that there's a professor, I don't know if you've heard of him, Professor Chinyamata Chipeta, who's basically spent his life, he's in his 80s now, dispelling this idea of self-interest and saying that economics is culturally specific, and that if you're in a society like Malawi, you are not going to just make decisions for you. I mean, how many times do we go to weddings of people we don't know, or funerals of people we don't know, because we know somebody who knew them? That's how we are, and we can't then assume that when making economic decisions it's going to be different. But what has happened is that we have adopted this idea, and if we teach it in our schools, and this is how we form our policies and how we study our economy, and do not take into account the differences in these really critical aspects of economic agents, which of course include women. So perhaps we need a mother of economics, since there's only a father, and it's Adam Smith, and it seems like the ideas of the 18th century are still going on today. But the world has changed, and our role as women in the economy has changed. And so the discipline needs to change with it, and the policies need to change with it. So there's a crucial need for the perspective and the role of women in economics, globally and in Malawi. So why do we need more women in the discipline of economics? So this is just basically repeating what I have said. And when we account for the economic growth of a nation, it has been found, and I've put some links at the end of this presentation, which I will share with Chikondi, and she can share with the rest of you, is that when there are gender gaps in education, when there are gender gaps in wage payments, when there are gender gaps in employment, these all have a negative influence on the rate of economic growth. So if we want to improve the growth, the prosperity of our nation, we need to ensure that more women are participating and are represented equally when it comes to economic opportunities. Women are involved in a lot of unpaid production. So this is an important one. So one of the key arguments of the feminist economics discipline is that when you go to a restaurant and you pay 2,000 kwacha for a meal, somebody went to buy the groceries and somebody used their electricity and they cooked and brought that meal to you. When you pay that 2,000 kwacha or however you've paid, you are paying for all of that service. So that service has been valued at 2,000 kwacha. But when you go home and you also buy the groceries and you also cook and you also use electricity and you also make the meal, no 2,000 kwacha is paid. But that is the same production and it should have the same value. Even if it is not paid, but it has value. It is production of value. And what feminist economics is arguing is that in economics, when we are accounting for who is contributing to our economy, and women are disproportionately involved in a lot of these unpaid productive activities. When you pay a babysitter to take care of your baby, and a woman decides that instead of working, she's going to stay home and take care of the baby, there is value in that in that activity that she's doing. Of course, she's not saying we're not saying we should pay women to do what they want to do. We are saying that what they do is work and that they are contributing to the economy just as much, and that economics as a discipline needs to account for that, because we account for it when it's done by somebody else and not by the woman herself. So this is sort of the core of the arguments of a feminist economics, without getting into too much detail. And then the other crucial thing is that women would be, if you have more women in the discipline, they are more likely to be featured in business or policy settings in economics books. So if you're reading an economics book and every time there's a man in a black suit, subconsciously it's feeding you that this is not for you and that this is just for some other person. So even if consciously you're not really deciding, oh, it's not for me, it's still feeding your psyche. And when you're making decisions, those things come back and determine the decisions that we make. So the things we see and we expose ourselves to are also very powerful. So the more women we have in the discipline, the more we can display women in all of the economic examples we give, and the more that others will be inspired to join the discipline and to show that, hey, this is something that a woman can also do effectively. Now, when it comes to the profession, we need to think about what are the implications on the decisions that affect all of us. So women and men have different opinions. This is just the way life is. And therefore, they need that complementarity in shaping economic policies. And I'll talk more about that in the next slide. But the point is that the more women we have represented and the more of their voices that are heard, then there will be more focus on the issues that women care about. And then the role models, yes, as we said, if you see yourself represented, and it's similar to race, if you see yourself represented in certain situations, you would more and more believe that this is something that I can do. This is a decision that a woman can make. So a practical example of how women in the economics profession can affect us in our daily lives, there was a survey that was done. Unfortunately, we do not have this information for Malawi, even Africa. And I'm hoping that going forward, these are data sets we can generate. But a survey was done in the US amongst female and male economists. And it was found that female economists were more likely to recognize income inequality than men economists. So you can already think how that's going to drive policy. Female economists were more supportive of government regulation. So a female economist was more likely to say, we need to regulate banks a little bit more. We need to make sure that there's consumer protection, that when you buy something and something is wrong, you should be protected by making that purchase. Female economists were more likely to say that employers should provide workers with health insurance than male economists. So you can already see the thinking and how different it is and why the representation of both genders is important. Female economists are also likely to be more concerned about the environment as we are pursuing macroeconomic policy compared to men. And female economists are more likely to study things like health economics, labor markets, compared to men who are more likely to study macroeconomics. And this is from the New York Times. And the guy who wrote this article actually said that the biggest the biggest conference where there were most female that he attended was a conference on economics and I think like childbearing. And he said there were a lot of women and that he's never been to a conference with that many women. And if there are more women in the profession, there would be more focus on these things that affect women. So finally, I'll say a little bit about Malawi. And basically in Malawi, we are not doing too badly in terms of our labor force participation compared to like sub-Saharan Africa or Zambia. But the female labor force participation in Malawi is lower than it was 30 years ago. So I was like, wow, we are actually digressing for some reason. And it's less than 50% of the labor force participation. And when we look a little bit closer, and I promise this is the only graph in this presentation, you will find that between 2000 and 2009, female women who are employed has changed. So you have less people employed in agriculture and more people employed in things like services. But the key thing that I want you to see is this wage and salaried workers. So wage and salaried workers are the number of women that have a consistent salary. You have a formal job that gives you a salary every month. And we can see that from 2000 to 2019, it's still a lot more men than women. Yes, there's been a 3% increase in women who are in wage and salaried work, but there's also a 3% increase in men, and women are still far behind men. So basically in the last decade as Malawi, we still have quite a long way to go in ensuring that the labor that women participate in is also, you know, not equally paid, but not just equally paid, but also of high value labor. Finally, I would like to stress that when we talk about equal economic opportunity, and when we talk about women being more represented in the economics profession and in the economics discipline, it's about equal treatment and not about asking for favors. I remember one man thought he was, I guess he thought he was complimenting me, but he said, oh, you know, you have the right passport and, you know, you have the right gender. So I think, you know, those international organizations, they'll just love you. You know, people have this idea that when we talk this way, and admittedly, you know, if you say you're a feminist, people will say, oh, you guys, you're extreme. We're not saying that we should get favors. We're saying that we need the opportunity to prove ourselves. So it's that opportunity that women need to be in the forefront and to also ably compete. So that's why, because of so many years of lagging behind, there's need policies to invest more in women and girls so that they can be ably equipped to be in positions of decision making. So this is not about us asking for favors. This is not about us saying we don't want to work hard and want to get ahead because we are women. It is about ensuring that there is equal treatment both in the profession and equal representation in making decisions that affect our lives every day. I'll end the presentation there so that there is time for questions. If you have any questions, as I said, I'll share this presentation, and I'll also talk about the assignment after we ask our questions. And all of this you will mostly find in all of the links that I have shared. Thank you.
Ooh. Thank you, Angela. That was such an enlightening presentation and very short, very to the point. Okay, I'm here, my video is on. I'm going to reclaim the host from you because I think there's some people in the waiting room. Hopefully they'll have some questions from some of the readings. But I'll open the floor to everyone now. For those who have questions, please just turn on your video, unmute yourself, introduce yourself, and you can ask any question that you have. Once we're done with the questions, then I'll hand back over to you, Angela, to then discuss the assignment.
While people are thinking of their presentations, I just wanted to say thank you so much, Sarai here. That was such an interesting and inspiring session from you. So thank you so much for being here with us today. It really means a lot. I think I cut somebody off, so I'll give them the space to ask their question.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, my name is Violet, and I don't know if it's a question, but yeah, it's true that there are a few females in economics, and personally, I can say that I feel like the exposure for like people in the economics field, like here in Malawi, is very low, especially in public schools and private schools that use the Malawian curriculum. Like, for example, myself, I went to a private school, but we were doing MSCE. So we didn't have economics and, other subjects like accounting and stuff. So I don't think like it never clicked that I would do economics. For me, it was either maybe medicine or other humanitarian courses. So I feel like if there has to be exposure for more people to be interested in doing economics, it would really be helpful if like most public schools or private schools were also exposed to such subjects. So I don't know. I just wanted to say that that it's really difficult for people to venture into that discipline if they really haven't been exposed to it. Yeah, that's it.
Thanks for that, Violet. I think Angela will tackle that one. Like how can we get more women interested in economics when they haven't the first exposure they've had to it, or even just the first that they've heard of it is when they're already at university, when they've already actually made their choices as to what courses they want to take. How can we get more young women exposed to economics and the beauty of economics at a younger age? Does anyone else have questions? I think Ali Nafi has also written, what if you never had a chance of being exposed and you never studied economics in your first degree? How do you participate in economics now? So if in whatever profession you're in, lawyer, you're a sociologist, you're doing anthropology, how can we get involved in economics right now?
So how does it work? Do you get a few questions and then I answer?
Well, I was hoping to get a few questions first, but then those are the questions. God, so you can just proceed for now. I think maybe people are still thinking about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I hope it was clear and interesting enough. So absolutely, Violet's question is true. For me, I was able to make this decision because I was exposed at a young age, and it was taught in my high school, and that's how I got to know it. And I honestly do not know if I would have been able to make that decision if I didn't have that exposure. And so when I was now applying to college, I was applying for only courses that would give me the opportunity to study economics in some way. So that was my sole focus. So you're right that there is a lack of exposure, and that has to do with our education policies. And also just awareness, with in public schools, that we need to create that awareness. And I think the onus is on us, and maybe even our economics department back at Chanko, to try and ensure that we have people, especially in public secondary schools, who are exposed to economics, because a lot of the business related studies are just not there. You don't get to really know until you're at a point where you have to make a decision, and at that point it's a bit late. So even if changing a curriculum might be a big policy change, but when there is that gap in between, to sort of encourage students to do a proper search, or like students when moving from Form 2 to Form 3 and they sort of deciding what subjects to take, to sort of help them to look around and find what they might want to do, and to ensure that they choose the subjects that are more relevant to subjects like economics. So yes, there's a public policy aspect of education, but there is also an aspect where we as economists need to sort of just go out there and advertise ourselves that this is a viable not only career, but also something that's very important for the society. And then on the second question, how do you then get involved in economics if you've already done a first degree in something else? Actually, it's not as difficult as you might think. So I've met a lot of economists who did not do economics as their first degree. Of course, like there's a guy who was an architect who ended up doing something like urban economics. So it has to do with urban plannings and how governments decide on housing policy. I've met people who studied physics, for example, and who ended up going into deep econometrics and very mathematical aspect of economics. But there, as I said, that there's so many different aspects of economics, as health and environmental and education and public policy and agricultural economics. So probably whatever you've studied, there's an economics discipline related to it. And it is not that difficult to transition. So for example, if you want to do a master's, there are universities that give you a bridge course before you start the master's to give you the basics of economics, so that you can study and just understand those introductory courses that you might have missed, and then you go on and get a master's in economics. So it's absolutely possible to do that, and it's never too late.
Thanks, Angela. We've got a question from Keisha. Keisha, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Montfaucon, for your presentation and for your enlightenment in terms of economics.
Oh, you can just call me Angela, by the way.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Hi. All right. Thank you for your presentation. I really learned a lot in terms of what you've spoken about in terms of economics and women's representation in economics. I had a chance, I read one of your blogs on mentorship and mentees, and what you're highlighting on, especially through your journey of how you really didn't know which route to take when it came to economics specifically, because you didn't have a mentor. And it's also true, like in my journey, I sometimes find it difficult in some areas because there's lack of mentorship, especially in Malawi, to support you and to guide you and to help you grow professionally and personally. So I just wanted to understand, is there a way, or like, have you done research on certain things in terms of mentorship in the economics field? How do you how do you go about it, especially with representation, like to help other young girls? What do you do in your line, especially with economics? Do you promote other young girls to like take economics? Because I've seen a lot of representation in terms of the STEM field, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And I don't know, I've never really seen economics being incorporated in that, even though I know it's mathematics related. But like, how do you believe we as young girls, we as African women should represent economics in different fields like that, in terms of programs, trainings? How do you believe, what do you believe we can, how do you believe we can go about that situation? Yeah.
Thanks, Keisha. And we have another question from Nelly Mwapo. They say it has been proven that economic empowerment of women enables them to make autonomous decisions with regards to their sexual and reproductive health rights. How can we, as civil society organizations and individuals, make this a reality despite the patriarchal societies we live in? Do you get it? And then, so that's question number 2. We have another question from Tamika, and I think when Tamika asks her question, then you can respond. Is that okay? 3 questions? Okay. Tamika, go ahead.
Hi. You talked about how the employment salaries are different between the men and the women. How does this affect their contribution to the GDP or GNP throughout the year? Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for those nice and tough questions. So, first on Keisha's question. Nice to know you read my blog. So yes, there is a lack of mentorship in Malawi, just in general. I completely agree with you. I actually personally have been trying to look for movements and organizations that are mentoring girls and see how I can partner with them. And I recently joined one, but they focus a lot on mentoring secondary school girls. It's called Mentor to Mentor. And absolutely, there really is not a lot of mentorship for young women who want to be economists. For me, like when I needed advice, I happened to have sort of learned, I used to be really timid, but I learned to speak up. And so when I had a question, for example, you know, Dr. Naomi Ngwira, she was the deputy governor of Reserve Bank when I was there. And when I was faced with a career choice, I was either going to quit my job or I stay in my job and I don't do my PhD. I actually went to her and asked her for a meeting to ask, to, you know, just to pick her brain on what do you think I should do? I'm faced with this decision in terms of my career, what would you advise? But I have met a lot of people who don't have the opportunity to do that, or maybe even the boldness to do that. And it's always very difficult if you are the one who has to reach out and it's not being provided. So at this point, I only know of a few mentoring programs that people that I know are running for girls, but they are not economics specific. I do not know of a program that is economics specific and trying to promote girls. I saw a page on Malawi feminist economics or something because of JGU actually. So I'm going to look into that. As for me, we have this thing I mentioned about Professor Chipeta and how he spent his life to dispel this self-interest nature of economics and to say that we need to study our culture and how we make decisions differently in applying economic policy. And I've worked with him quite a lot. So we have this, I started this Indigenous Economics Club in Chancellor College. It's still there, but now that I left many years ago, we are setting up an Indigenous Economics Club. It's not girl specific, but it's a platform for me to also try to encourage young people to who want to be economists to join in the economics. Because I was working with him when I was an undergrad. He was just asking us to do things that anybody can do. You didn't have to be an economist. But I had exposure to the disparities of economics when it comes to studying different cultures or studying women because of that. So it's a movement that would allow non-economists to also understand how the economy of like Malawi works, because we talk to like local businesses and understand how they get credit, etc. So it would help understand other people to understand how those function. So we are in the process of setting that up with him, and hopefully it can be a platform to encourage other people to study economics. Otherwise, I am also there, and I advertise myself that if you have questions, please spam me, and I will try to answer as much as possible. And whenever we have research projects, I always try to reach out also to girls who are doing economics to, oh, can you do this for me, and we'll pay you so much, just so that you understand that, hey, people can pay you to do research for your own country. So you're contributing to your country and somebody's paying for your time. So it's also an opportunity for that. But absolutely, we need to do a lot more, and hopefully we can do that. And then on the question on sexual and reproductive health, so true. We really live in societies that are very judgmental when it comes to these things. But it's true that, yes, when a woman is empowered, she is more likely to make decisions concerning your body. That is absolutely true, and studies have shown that. But in a patriarchal society like we live in, the empowerment part is what has become more difficult. And this is where making sure that economic opportunities are more accessible to women than they currently are is absolutely crucial, because it translates to all of these things that a woman who is economically empowered is less likely to stay in an abusive relationship, for example, if she's not completely hinged and dependent on the man. So there's a lot of other aspects that empowering a woman economically would translate to the well-being and the decisions that a woman will make concerning their life and their bodies and even their children. So it's very true, and even in societies like ours, it's absolutely crucial that then we make policies that specifically target women and ensure that women have access to opportunities to better themselves. And then on the question by Tamika, okay, so how do employment salaries and wages contribute to economic growth? Yes, so as I mentioned in the presentation, that gender inequalities in employment, in wages, has been found to negatively affect economic growth. And the reason is simple. It's because your economy basically has potential and you're putting it aside. I am currently in Japan, and they are actually having problems because in Japan, women literally have to choose between a career or having a family. And the moment you have a family, you have a baby, you leave work and you're going to spend your life taking care of the child and managing the money. And now, because the Japanese are very old, they don't have enough people working in the economy. And the women that do work in the economy, they are unequally paid. So basically, you're saying that you are giving this economic agent less money to spend in the economy. So whoever would have received that money, all of those businesses are now, there's now less for them to receive to also benefit that business. And so it's a vicious cycle. And if they have less, they spend less, there's less that's collected in value added tax, and the government gets less. So the whole of the economy can be affected by just this one policy. So by making sure that women are paid equally and they are valued equally, you would ensure that the economy is also getting the best of the human capital that it has, instead of basically you're losing out on human resources and production that could be happening in the economy. So there's in some of those monetary readings, you will find a lot of these analysis, but I've also included a study on Malawi that's specific on the economic impact of investing in the girl child and how it can progress the Malawian economy. So that's a link that's in this presentation, and I really encourage you to read on it because it's very interesting results, and you will see that there is very real, tangible implications to the prosperity of the whole nation just by empowering women. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Ange. Just picking up on that one. Now, this one is a personal question. Now, I always I'm stuck in thinking about what tangible steps we can take at the moment in like our little spheres of influence to, as on a personal level, to be more economically conscious, as in to think about how every single action of ours impacts the economy, and also how, like in the grand scheme of things, how we can empower others around us to, you know, be more conscious of economics and how we can use economics to improve ourselves and better ourselves, like on a very personal level. But that's just me. There's another question from Easter, who's asking how you can measure the power of women in economic decisions at family, community, and national level. And Grace, I think, is on here and she has a comment. Grace, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, so this is a comment on how empowering women in economics can change the world. I was just going through the guide to women economy, which when I was going through it, there's a survey that suggests that when you employ more women, that means you're moving them. You're not giving them a sense that they are houseworkers anymore. You are giving them jobs, which will create jobs for other people as well. For example, if you employ women, that means you're giving room to nannies or house helpers to come and fill in their jobs, giving them a clear picture that there are more women that are being employed, not just only them working at home as well. So I think that can help as well in empowering women, making sure that you're creating jobs for even more people in the society, giving each and every person the opportunity to work. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace. And I think I can hand over to you on those ones, if you'd like to take them. And we've had you here for 53 minutes now as well. So if you want these to be your last set of questions, or if you're open to having another set of questions and comments, you let me know. If this is enough for you, then you can then transition into assignment discussion. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And thank you again all for all your questions. So how to measure the power of women? Wait, Chikondi, you had a question or there was a comment about how to be more, what can we do on a practical level to be more economically conscious?
Yes, that was it. It was very long-winded. You've put it perfectly.
Yeah, that's a tough one and maybe a bit more philosophical. But yeah, I think it's to understand that for me, it sort of brings back to understand that the study of economics is in our everyday lives, right? And that everything we do affects somebody else. So for me personally, like, I know it's probably weird, but like, when I'm buying something, when I'm back home in Malawi and I'm buying something, it's very hard for me to negotiate. Like when I'm dealing with those women who are selling like tomatoes or potatoes in the market, and they charge me a certain price, my family's always like, why do you always just take it? They've put a markup and they need you, but I can't bring myself to do it because I'm like, wow, this woman, I don't know what she's going to do with this 500 kwacha. It seems so little to me, right? And I just feel like I need to help that spirit that she's doing something to make sure that she's doing something for her family and earning a living. So I've become so conscious of it that it's very hard for me to make somebody like, no, bring down the price. Of course, if it's another setting and somebody's scamming you, it's different. But like in these very local businesses, I am almost inspired when I see that, and I want to help that. So maybe that's just the economist in me. But that's how I sort of consciously on a day-to-day basis try to help myself to do. At the same time, like if you're getting somebody to help you do something at your home, you know, it's just kind of to think about the costs that they're going to face and the money that we pay them. So I have a different opinion on things like minimum wage and all of that the government is trying to put in place, because they have all sorts of other implications. But it's just to kind of understand that when you are paying for a service, you are actually paying for a service, and that the person you're paying needs this money to have come to you. But I think it's a lot more than that, and it goes back to what I think Violet or somebody said, that it really comes back to exposure and trainings and information really going out there, so that as a society we understand all of our different roles. We understand why staying at home is actually really working badly for the economy, because then businesses aren't open. If they're not open, they can't employ people. If they can't employ people, those people cannot buy food for their families. And then there's just this trigger effect to the decision that we need to stay home. And that's why a crisis like COVID-19 is just devastating for a lot of people, and devastating for a lot of women that never had economic opportunities in the first place. And now, like, if they can't leave, then it's even worse for them. So I think it's sort of understanding all of these different aspects of the economy and your role in it. How to measure the power of women in decision making is a difficult one. I mean, the examples that I gave in the presentation, that, you know, things like those surveys that were done just to understand how women think compared to men when it comes to different aspects of decisions that affect the society or the economy. That gives us an idea of what can we expect when we have more women represented and more women making decisions. We can expect that balance that comes in when men and women are both represented, because it's a complementary. We're not saying kick out the men, but we're saying that let's bring in more women. So I think it's just things like these surveys and some of these stats help us understand that when you have more women, what actually happens? When you have more women, what are the things that they will actually care about? And so we would be able to know that, okay, it means that we're more likely to have more discussions about our education policy, more discussions about labor policy, etc., because women are more interested in things like that. But in terms of measuring their power in the decision, exactly, it is a lot more difficult. And I will attempt to also answer.
Angela, can you hear me? I think we couldn't hear.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You couldn't hear me at all?
Oh, no, we couldn't hear the last part where you said, I think I'll also attempt to answer such and such.
Oh, it was about how to measure women's decisions. Did you hear that?
Yes. We had just.
Oh, okay. Alinaf's mic is unmuted. Okay.
Oh.
No, I was just saying that that's very difficult to do. But things like the survey that I showed in the presentation help us understand how differently women may approach certain things compared to men. How women may notice some more inequalities compared to men. And that can give us an idea of the power of decision making and how it can be enhanced by having more women. And what I said was that we're not trying to replace the men, but we're saying we need to have more women because it's complementary, because our experiences have been different, and that the focus that we're going to have would, you know, ensure that other women are not further left behind. It's not a perpetual, you know, story of women always being behind. Yeah, and then I said that I could take one more round of questions, and then maybe we can discuss the assignment.
Okay. Oh,
if there are more questions.
Stand up quickly. Chimamwe, are you there?
Yes.
All right, go ahead.
All right.
Angela talked about how many women are in the unpaid work because of their reproductive roles. Some are fine and happy doing that, while others don't have any option. So as a country like Malawi, what can we do to show that the unpaid work that women do is of value?
Yeah, I mean, if I can answer this question, maybe I can also win a Nobel. But this is the billion-dollar question. But for example, in the UK, they actually found a way to measure the unpaid productive work that women do. And they found that the value of that work was larger than the value of the financial sector. So, yeah, so there are ways that we can do it. I don't know yet how we can do it in Malawi. Malawi is a heavily rural, we still have a large majority of the population living in the rural areas. It's always very difficult to collect, but there are ways that can be done. Like I gave the example of how much you pay for a meal, right? So that gives you an idea of the value of how much value you've generated in your unpaid production when you make a meal at home, for example. So that's a way that can be done. And I know that it's been done. I can't speak as of now of how that can be done in Malawi. It's something that I'm really looking into. But hopefully we can find it and, begin to measure it.
That's a tough one. I think even in just feminist legal theory, it's a big one, like unpaid work and care work. How do you measure it? How do you quantify it? How do you value it? And it's hard. It's very hard. Yeah, I guess this is the brunt of the work is borne by women in a lot of economies, like childcare. Even now, like if you look at the COVID pandemic, the majority of care, not necessarily the formal healthcare work system, but just the provision of care is being done by women in homes, in families. It is being done by women, and it would be very difficult to quantify that. Any more questions, guys? I think this is it, Ange. I'm going to hand over to you to discuss assignment, but before you go, we would like to take a selfie with you. So I'll just ask everyone to turn on their videos and then we'll take
This is a selfie in the virtual world.
Yes.
I want to say one thing, that there is a saying that says not everything that counts can be counted. And I think it's an important thing when we think about economics, that it's not everything that we can put a number, because we are, as economists, we're obsessed with putting numbers and everything on a graph, but not everything that that counts can be counted. And we need to be a bit more innovative in that. And that's why we need you, young people.
This is true. This is true. All right, should we do selfie first or assignment first? I can see
we can do the selfie since everyone's video is coming on.
Okay, is everybody ready? Oh, wow, everybody's looking nice. Hey, wow, friends, huh? You could have given us a heads up, huh? Look at me just looking like I'm coming out of bed. Okay, everybody, wait, hang on. I have to remember how to do it. Okay, I've oriented myself. Okay, everybody smile, say cheese. Can you hear my camera? It's legit.